In today's video, we have some huge trade rumor updates on the Montreal Canadiens and the Vancouver Canucks. Could we see a huge trade for Pierre-Luc Dubois heading to Montreal in the offseason? Plus, are the Habs rejecting good offers for Josh Anderson? And are the Canucks really close to really blowing things up and really trading a lot of players? Plus, we have news from the NHL waiver wire and several injury updates and roster moves from around the league. All that and more coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have a variety of NHL news and some trade talk to take a look at here today. Before we do that, I just want to quickly remind you of one of our channel partners and sponsors, Fanatics, of course, a huge provider of NHL merchandise. We do have some more Stadium Series jerseys coming out here very soon for the Capitals Canes outdoor game. They have all kinds of stock as well for the reverse retro jerseys that you've seen and all kinds of other great NHL merchandise. Our affiliate link is down below in the pinned comment. All purchases do help the channel and all of your support is greatly appreciated. So certainly check out Fanatics for all of your merchandise needs. As I mentioned, we do have news from the NHL waiver wire. The Vancouver Canucks have placed forward Lane Peterson on waivers today for the purpose of being assigned to the American Hockey League, is what their actual Twitter account made mention of earlier today. A lot of Vancouver media found it surprising because they were reporting at practice this morning that new coach Rick Tocchet actually had juggled the lines and had placed Lane Peterson on the top line for line rushes at practice this morning, and then yet he's on waivers. When Tocchet was asked about this after practice, he said that he wasn't sure what management was doing, and it could be just a paper transaction, but the Twitter account for the Canucks specifically said he was being placed on waivers for the purpose of assignment, so I'm not sure that it's just a paper move. So I'm not sure that they're all on the same page of what's going on there. Obviously, I know they are, obviously new to the coaching staff and all that, but still, just seemed odd. But yes, Lane Peterson's on waivers. We'll find out at 2 o'clock Eastern time tomorrow if indeed he gets claimed or if he can be reassigned or if the Canucks actually intend on leaving him with the big club. Now, of course, when players come up after clearing waivers, they have to do that within 10 games or 30 days. They will require waivers again. I don't believe he's hit a threshold for that just yet, so we'll have to see where things go on that front. Some big injury updates here today, including Maple Leafs forward Austin Matthews is going to be out with a knee injury for a minimum of 3 weeks, which puts him coming back sometime after the All-Star break. It's been reported that he has a knee strain, and that it happened sometime during the game against the New York Rangers. Of course, I guess in some ways, because of the All-Star break coming up, he may not miss too much time. Of course, Austin Matthews was also scheduled to appear at this year's NHL All-Star game, so he will no longer be able to do that. He's been replaced by Florida Panthers captain Alexander Barkov. Barkov, of course, will be part of the hometown crowd. From Florida, they only had one other member of the Panthers going to the All-Star game, which obviously for the bulk of the fans there will be from the Florida area, I would think. So certainly, exciting for them. Although I've seen a lot of people online today, whether it be Leaf fans saying that Nylander should replace him. I've seen Sens fans saying Timmy Stützle should have replaced him. And I think they all have valid arguments to some degree, but it doesn't shock or surprise me that the hometown captain of the team who's having a good season was selected. I mean, that's, quite common that you see the hometown, hosting team have multiple players. It was unusual for them just to have the one representative so far. But for the Matthews, I don't think the Leafs need to be too concerned. I've seen different reports out there. Chris Johnson, a well-connected NHL insider who seems to generally have one of the best pulses on the Leafs, said that he was told that it wasn't too serious, wasn't anything to be too worried about. So clearly, I would like to take his word for it on that. I've seen some in Maple Leaf media, especially today, this afternoon on Overdrive on the TSN radio program with Jeff O'Neill, Jamie McLennan, and Brian Hayes, and they were having a discussion about whether or not Matthews would come back, and could this be a scenario where he sits out the rest of the year and they put him on LTIR, and then that gives them a huge pool of money they can spend over the cap to really load up for the playoffs. It's already being talked about, and it's only been the first day that this has been announced. I really don't see that happening. Injuries can always turn out to be different or worse than expected, but I don't think they would have, announced it the way they did if it was that serious. Really, if you think about the amount of time that's left in the NHL season, it would have to be a pretty serious, significant injury for them to do that. I know there's A lot of people think back a couple of years ago when Nikita Kucherov didn't play, they LTIR'd him, and suddenly he was just fine to play on day one of the Stanley Cup playoffs, and he had a great playoff run, and of course helped them win the Stanley Cup. So I know, I'm sure other teams have contemplated, not to say that Tampa did that intentionally, but I know some people think they did. Either way, the fact it's even being discussed is a little bit crazy, a little bit premature in my opinion. I don't think that, Elite fans need to be too concerned. The other thing too is that typically, in the past at least, when Matthews has missed time, the Leafs have typically done okay. It's not like, really, I think if you're the Leafs opponent and you have the option of facing the Leafs with Matthews or without Matthews, I think 10 times out of 10, you're going to select without Matthews. Why wouldn't you? He's a terrific player who's, typically puts up a lot of offense, a lot of goals, and it's tough to play against. So, from that perspective, I think their opponents will be content. But like I said, they do have a good record when he's not in the lineup. So we'll see how this goes. I don't see this being a case of a season-ending LTIR scenario where they can bulk up. I guess anything's possible, but I think that's very much premature to go down that road here just yet. Some other injuries of note around the league, including Columbus Blue Jackets forward Gus Nyquist. He's being called out indefinitely. It was an upper body injury. That's also a big blow for Columbus. Nyquist was yet another player who's on an expiring contract and expected to be traded at the deadline. So that could be a situation where if Columbus can't trade him because of the injury, that they could lose out on some assets there that would have come back. So let that be a lesson learned to other teams that are already in that boat. I know I've seen Vancouver media talking today already about some of their players that are expected to be moved, that should they be sitting out and being protected, especially where there's an extended break coming up for the All-Star game. It might be a time where you miss 1 or 2 games, but you can have several days off where they might be able to consummate some trades. But Nyquist, we'll see what happens there. Blues centerman Robert Thomas is also out, considered day-to-day. He was injured in their last game, and what they call a lower body injury, so we don't know too much more than that. Shouldn't be too long by the sounds of things. The Calgary Flames the other night lost Chris Tanev. Looked like a shoulder injury. I have not, as of right now, at least seen an announcement with a timeline, but I do know he's officially been placed on injured reserve, so he's going to be out for at least a week to 10 days, but I would think that it could be longer term. It looks serious. I don't know. We'll see. I know they're a completely different team in blue line without Tanev back there, so I hope for the Flames' sake he's not out too long, but it didn't look good. But we'll see. They did get back Brett Ritchie, though, who's been activated off IR. The Seattle Kraken today announced that Matty Beniers is going to miss the final couple of games before the All-Star break as well. They had the game against the Vancouver Canucks the other night, and a big hit from Tyler Myers, which was complete garbage in my opinion. The hit itself, by the definition of what a body check is, I guess you could say was clean and as far as the contact goes, but the problem was the puck was nowhere near Beniers. Nowhere near him. He just, out of the blue, in the middle of the ice, run him over. And what the heck was that? And it was a big hit. Myers is a big man, and Beniers went down pretty good, and you could tell he was hurt. He didn't return to the game. He only ended up playing 9 minutes that game, and he's going to be out for a few more games. So that's certainly bad news for one of the Kraken's best offensive players. I'm really surprised that there was I didn't see anything from NHL player safety. Even a fine of some sort, because that was really just complete interference for sure. I'm not really sure if you could call it anything more than that, because like I said, if you look at just the contact, it didn't look like there was hit to the head or anything of that nature. It's just the fact that he was not eligible to be checked. Puck was nowhere to be found, so I'm not sure what Myers was doing there, but I'm surprised nothing came from it. And Joel Edmondson, a Montreal defenseman who's had some rumors around him as well. I'm not sure it's a given he gets traded. He does have some term in his contract. We've heard that he would prefer to stay in Montreal. I'm not sure how the Habs feel about that, because I know they are getting some calls from information from NHL insiders on his services. I think he'd be a good fit at some of the playoff teams that are looking to maybe acquire him, but he's injured now. I don't know what the prognosis is. I haven't, again, another player who was just hurt, and I haven't seen the update to indicate what kind of timelines we're dealing with. It could be just a day-to-day thing. I just know he left the game and did not return. On to the trade section of the video. I do want to talk first about Vancouver, then we're going to get into a few things on Montreal. We know the Canucks are a team that's been talked about a lot this year because of the drama and all the stuff going on there. Elliot Friedman, in a recent interview, went on to say that he does expect between now and the trade deadline and then again in the offseason that before we get to next year, that we're going to see a significant amount of trades involving a significant group of players from this franchise. There's no doubt. He's obviously, we already know Bo Horvat is as good as gone after signing Miller, after signing Kuzmenko. It's a done deal. Horvat's going. It's a matter of where he goes and what the return is at this point. We know Brock Besser is a player who I don't think he gets to the point where he requested a trade, but I think he and his agent know that it's probably time for a fresh start, time to move on. As agent was given permission earlier this year to talk to other teams to find a trade. That's obviously never materialized yet. The latest intel from Rick Dhaliwal in Vancouver media says that there's around 6 or 7 teams that have shown interest or kicking tires. It doesn't sound like anything's gotten serious at this point, so nothing is imminent. But obviously, if his numbers were better and he was producing more, then certainly would be more interest. But a team is going to have to, if they're going to make that trade, they're going to have to make the deal based on hoping he gets back to what he used to be, and he hasn't been that in a while. And that's like your 25, 30 goal scoring winger. He has shown flashes of it at times, but terribly inconsistent the past couple of seasons. But sometimes you just need that fresh start to get reignited. You just never know. But Besser's another name. Freeman also mentions Tyler Myers. If he's not traded by the deadline, that once his signing bonus is paid this summer, his contract will be a lot more easier to move, you could say. So expect a Myers deal sometime over that course of period of time. Connor Garland's another name that I think the Canucks would like to move. And if he's not traded, and if you can't find a trade, that he could be a buyout candidate for the offseason. And of course, Thatcher Demko's name is coming up as well. Friedman mentioned that. Rick Dhaliwal's mentioned and confirmed as well that his name is definitely out there and circulating. Again, I don't think anything is real serious on Demko, but teams are calling. The Canucks are listening. I think it's at an early preliminary stage where they're probably trying to gauge the market and determine what the asking price is going to be, what teams might be willing to give up in a deal, and kind of evaluate from there. I think they're just basically in evaluation mode. I think guys like Horvat and Besser, they've been having these conversations for a longer period of time, so I think we're closer on those guys getting moved, but it could still be a little while yet. But like I said, between now and the deadline, we could see a lot of players, including some of these big names, moved out. Even Jeff Merrick, when Elliot Friedman and Merrick were talking on his program the other day, he even wondered about JT Miller, because obviously Miller's contract, his extension kicks in here, which for next season, which is a big contract, which he's not really living up to here as of yet. Obviously, right now, I think a lot of Canuck fans would agree that looks like a mistake. Not only is Miller possibly not going to be worth that kind of money, but it's causing them to not keep Horvat, which is like a double whammy. But the other big test here between now and the end of the year is how is he going to get along with head coach Rick Tocchet. You can see Tocchett's already kind of using some tough love on him for sure. And if they don't get along and things don't go, will it get to a point that Miller might want to move, even though the Canucks obviously will likely try to make everything work with him. If they sign him to a long-term mega deal, I don't know that it's going to be easy to do if they wanted to trade Miller. He does have a form of a no-trade clause in his new contract, but that won't kick in until the free agent period starts next offseason. So they do have time if they wanted to consider it. I'm not sure if it would ever get to that, but like I said, it's kind of an experiment right now, and that's also part of the reason I think why they wanted to do the coaching change when they did, is to see the connection and see if another coach can kind of rein him in, get him going, because certainly, that contract says not looking good, not only from a statistical production standpoint, but an attitude standpoint as well. He really appears to be at times a toxic teammate, and I think some of it you could say comes from a good place because it's that competitive drive to win, but how he reacts on the bench, you can tell his teammates certainly don't know what to think of him at times. At least that's how it looks to me when you see how they react to his little outbursts when things aren't going well. But we'll see. It could be very interesting. Things are not going to get less dramatic in Vancouver for a long time here by the looks of things. And in Montreal, I want to talk about a couple of things. One, we got reports that the Montreal Canadiens apparently have been getting a lot of interest in Josh Anderson. We've had his name come up in the rumor mill on a few different occasions here in the last couple of months. I've talked about it on a couple of different occasions. Of course, we never got to a point, though, where it sounded like a trade was really close or anything like that. The rumors were always that Montreal was not looking to trade him, but they were getting interest. There were certain teams that might have been mentioned as kind of poking around, kicking tires, asking Montreal about Anderson. But like I said, we never really got to that point where it sounded like it was super close. I know at one point he was linked to the Calgary Flames. There's been other teams as well. But now we have reports saying that Montreal has actually had some pretty serious trade offers for Josh Anderson, including one that has a first-round pick included, and they rejected it. So that tells me that if they're not going to take a trade for Anderson that has a first-round pick plus something else in it, then they're probably not going to move this guy. I mean, I understand they need some veterans to stay with the team as they go through this rebuild. Certainly, he seems like he's a good fit and gets along well with a lot of their younger players. He's obviously signed to a longer-term contract, so we'll have to see. But the fact that they're rejecting significant offers with like that really says that they're not moving this guy, and it's going to take something to really blow their socks off to move him. So I can't imagine a team offering more than that. Now on Montreal radio, I heard a conversation regarding Pierre-Luc Dubois coming up again. Of course, this was recently brought up again by Nick Kypreos to Toronto media. I'm not sure why he was getting involved, but like I said before, sometimes Kypreos likes to get things stirred up. But ultimately, Montreal radio, including Georges Larac, talking about this, about a Pierre-Luc Dubois trade to Montreal in the offseason. We know that it's been reported again that Dubois likely will not sign anything more than a one-year deal in Winnipeg this offseason like he did this past year because he wants to get to UFA status as early as possible, and his intention is to play in Montreal. His agent even confirmed that last offseason, that he definitely has desire to play in Montreal someday. I mean, at the time, he wasn't under contract, so I don't think there's technically nothing wrong with saying that, but basically got confirmation that that's where he wants to be, and that might be the only place that he'll really want to sign a long-term deal. Of course, if they'll have him. He was at the draft. There was rumors at the draft that the Habs were in the process of making a big deal to acquire him. It never happened. They ended up acquiring Kirby Dach instead. And now, ever since Dach has been there was talk, well, maybe they'll use Dach to flip for Dubois. Because if you think about it, if you're the Winnipeg Jets, you're going to want a younger-ish centerman coming back because they don't really want to lose Dubois. I'm sure they'd love to sign him and keep him. He's been a good fit. Production-wise, has been good. There's lots to like. I think he would be a player they'd want to build around. They're obviously having a great season, so this is not going to happen now. But like Kypreos even said, based on his information, even if the Jets went on to win the Stanley Cup this year, that would not change Dubois' mind about wanting to leave when he's a free agent. So obviously Winnipeg probably is not going to let that happen. They've typically traded a lot of other players because unfortunately they've run into those a few times now, whether it be Andrew Copp, Jacob Trouba, and a few others. They're going to when they get to that final year, that's when you're likely going to see a trade. So to me, it does make sense that we could see a Dubois trade in the offseason, given where things are at with the structure of the contract and all that. Montreal does seem like a good destination for him, but would Montreal move Dach? I mean, Dach has really made some good strides to improve his game since he's been there. He's been a good fit. He fits well with a lot of their other young players. He can play center. He's played a bunch on the wing as well with Montreal, sometimes with Nick Suzuki. So certainly, I'm not entirely convinced they'd want to trade him, but I don't think the Winnipeg Jets make that trade unless it's a player like him coming back. But if Winnipeg does not want to consummate that deal and they want to hang on too long, the closer he gets to UFA status is going to push his value down because Montreal ultimately could just wait and be like, listen, we'd like to have you in Montreal, but we're willing to wait it out. We're going through a rebuild. Like having you one season or the next isn't going to make a huge difference for us. We'll wait and sign you as a free agent. So ultimately, to me, I think that probably makes the most sense from Montreal's standpoint. From Winnipeg's standpoint, when he gets into that final year next year, obviously, or into the summer when he could be eligible to sign that one-year deal versus a long-term deal, it's complicated. I don't know. I mean, the conversation on the radio was basically if you were offered Dubois for Dach, 1-for-1, would you do the trade? And they said they would do it, in a heartbeat, not even have to think about it. And I get that. As much as Dach is a good player, Dubois is a really good player too. A little bit more experience. I see the appeal there, but wouldn't you like to have both players? And you could probably do so if you wait an extra year. So I'm not really sure why Montreal would want to rush. But at the same time, Winnipeg's going to be in a tough spot, and they don't want to lose him for nothing. That's for sure. They gave up Patrick Laine to get this guy. They're not going to want to walk in free agency with no return. So let me know your thoughts on that. Should Montreal do that, or should they just wait and get him in free agency? Let me know your thoughts on that and the Canucks and stuff and everything else here down in the comments. We'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, of course, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with the latest news, rumors, and analysis of all 32 NHL teams. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.